Welcome to Life on Earth. Welcome to Life on Earth. Welcome to Life on Earth.
Well, hello, you good people, and welcome to Life on Earth. And we've got special guests this week. First of all, you know Life on Earth with Robert Nasir. It used to be Life on Earth with Robert and Amy Nasir. Well, it is again, at least for today.
All right, here I am.
And today we have a special guest. Some of you know Dr. Robert Garmong from his long history with the Objectivist movement. Of course, we're on the Ayn Rand Center UK channel. Some of you know Dr. Garmong from his book, Why? Why Philosophy? If you haven't read that book, well, links in the show notes.
Good book.
But Dr. Garmong, welcome to Life on Earth. Welcome to our Thursday show. How are you doing this? Well, for folks who don't know, you're in China this morning at 5 in the morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you. Bright and early, well, dark and early here.
And we had the opportunity to talk to you on our Sunday show. You can find that, folks, afterward at youtube.com/Robert Nasir. And Dr. Garmong, you are facing some real challenges right now in your life. For folks who don't know, and in the Objectivist community, half of you out there have already heard, but for folks who haven't, you have had a hell of a year. Did you want to give us the real short version of that? Because we're actually going to be talking more about healthcare in general, but what happened?
Yeah, I ask that myself sometimes. Early in 2023, I was diagnosed with with cancer. And fortunately, I have a relatively survivable cancer so far. It happens to be the same type of cancer that got Steve Jobs, which is a good thing because it's a very slow moving and kind of a lazy cancer. So the chemotherapy has been doing a bang up job, and I'm feeling better every day now. I've really turned the corner, but it's been 7+ months, almost 8 months of not being able to work. And I'm just now starting back to work a little tiny bit, but recovering my health as well as I can. So it has been a heck of a year.
Now, on that Sunday show, in that discussion we had, we talked a little bit about, well, the challenges of healthcare in China. And because obviously folks can tell you're an American, you are somebody who has gone to China. And so you're accessing healthcare in a way that requires for you to pay up front, for you to pay for everything you're going to get. And Amy, you started a fundraiser for this for folks to help out, because that's not cheap.
Yes, I did. I put together a GoFundMe. And so if anybody wants to check that out, you can just Google GoFundMe and Garmong, Garmong, and you'll be able to find it there. We've raised a good amount of money so far, and we're still looking forward to raising some more. A lot of wonderful people who have contributed to that. Yep. And I just thank everyone who has contributed to it so far.
There's a whole story there, and we'll tell a little bit about that story. Link, incidentally, our producer has already added to the YouTube chat. Click on that if you want to be a part of that. There's a great story. We'll tell the short version. Short version of the story is, it's a long-standing question in objectivism and in pro-capitalist circles for people who want free markets. Well, what would happen to people who find themselves through no fault of their own in difficult circumstances, and they're fine? The standard kind of pat answer is, well, as long as they're decent people are going to volunteer. There's charities and there's other ways to raise money. And when you talk to folks about that, especially folks who aren't aligned with free markets, they'll say, well, sure, you say that, but would people really contribute when somebody is falling on hard times? So Amy, you started a GoFundMe, and in a relatively short amount of time, the Objectivist community came through with several $1,000s in support, large contributions, small contributions. And then the best part of that is the show Ted Lasso. What has that got to do with all of this? I did a show on Ted Lasso a few weeks ago. And Dr. Garmong, you told us you were a fan of Ted Lasso, actually, about the time all of this came together.
Mhm.
And there is an objectivist, Joel Marquez, out there on Facebook, on the social media, decided, because he was a fan of Ted Lasso, to start a group.
Mhm.
And he made one mistake that worked out well. He meant to make a private group, but by default, it comes out public. And he never got around to changing it. Well, it's a group called Ted Lasso Talk. A lot of people love Ted Lasso, so they joined the group, and it's great. We had conversations. Not meaning for it to go this way, he ended up with 55,000 subscribers in this little Facebook group. And Joel did the niftiest thing when he heard about the effort that Amy was making on Dr. Garmong's behalf. He put up a post, and they don't normally do this there, but he said, ignore this post if you want, but we've got somebody who I really like, I admire, who's facing these challenges. If you want to go to his GoFundMe, put in $5 or $10, $20, a small contribution. That would be great. Otherwise, just skip this, go to the next post. And what was it? Within 3 or 4 days?
Within 3 or 4 days, yes, we reached over $5,000 just from that
Additional
one post.
5,000.
An additional, yes, and so that's the power of sharing this information on your social web. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you'd like to share it. Just say, I know this person, or I admire this person, I like this person's writing, or however, and say, this person is worthy for all of my friends to support him with a $5 donation on GoFundMe. So everybody here who is listening right now is very much welcome to share the GoFundMe page and talk a little bit about it. And I'd really appreciate it. That'd be great.
Now, we're not doing a fundraiser today, but we know there will be people who'll be interested. So we want you to have that information.
Yes.
We are fundraising, though, for the channel we're on, the Ayn Rand Center UK. So I want to give a shout out to Bonnie. Bonnie Bertrand is in with a super sticker. Thank you for that contribution. Very much appreciated. If you want to support the channel, if you enjoy this interview and you want to support what we're doing here, please join the ARC UK using the link at the top of the chat, or just put in your own super chat, your own comment or super sticker. If you have any questions, you can make them stand out with that. Now, with that out of the way, on that Sunday show, Dr. Garmong, when you were on, you told us about the Chinese healthcare system, and that fascinated me because, well, I should let you tell it, but my initial impression was it's a communist country. Obviously, they have socialized medicine, right? And maybe as a foreigner, you have a harder time accessing that. But of course, they're going to have something like Britain, something like France, or even the US, which isn't really socialized medicine, but it's so regulated. It's in some ways even worse. That wasn't what you found at all, was it?
Well, in certain respects, I should say, of course, no country is without heavy regulations of the healthcare industry. But they have borrowed certain aspects of free market and sort of glommed them onto their system, and not necessarily the aspects of a free market that you or I would choose to select if we were building our own healthcare system. So I think it helps. Before I get into those details, I'll leave a little bit of suspense if people haven't already heard me rant on this. But you think about a country like China with a population of 1.6 billion people or something, and even that number is very fuzzy, most of whom are extremely poor compared to, for example, the United States or other developed countries. And yet some of whom are extremely wealthy, more billionaires, I believe, in this country than in any other country on earth per capita, if I recall correctly. So it's an extremely poor country. It's also an extremely wealthy country. So they're building their economy the right way or the wrong way. It's been developing. And so how do you come up with a healthcare system that can service in any meaningful way that incredibly huge swath of a country, a swath of people, some of whom are desperately poor, some of whom are quite well off. And the geographical differences, the big cities tend to be very well off, and the rural areas tend not to be. So they've made some interesting choices. And I'm not there yet. I'm still going to keep you in suspense for a moment. But if you think about it, the healthcare system, and these are all sort of vaguely socialist sounding terms, but the system itself can be thought of as being really two separate elements. One is the medicine itself, the expertise of the doctors and the nurses and everybody else, technicians of all kinds, the research that's gone into all of that expertise, the actual medicines that are available. It doesn't do you any good if your doctor knows exactly what I would do if I could get the right drugs, right? So there's what I call the medicine part, or the medical part of the healthcare system. And then there's the facilities. And obviously there's overlap between those two, but there's the actual building that you go to. There's the actual MRI machine that you get injected into, and all of those things. There's the nursing care, which is part of the and here I'm not talking about the RN type stuff, but I'm talking about sponge baths and the basic nursing care I would put under facilities. And so what the Chinese have done, and I'm reverse engineering it, I didn't read this in some party official statement, but the way I like to think about it is they decided at some point to pour all of their resources into the medical side and virtually none into the facilities side. And I would put on the facilities side also means to help people to pay for all of this medicine. So now I'm getting closer. So let's say, for example, you have an emergency in the United States and you're wheeled into the hospital and you can't pay. And so the first thing you're going to do once they've stabilized your condition, whatever it happens to be, you're going to sit down with whom? Your doctor? Probably not, right? The first person you're going to sit down with is a financial advisor of some sort, right? The hospitals in the US employ some sort of advisor who can help you figure out, number one, what can we do to make it easier for you, i.e. cut the bills radically and send the bills to the government, et cetera. And then also payment plans. Do you have any resources you could liquidate, sell the bass boat or whatever? And so they're going to sit you down with a financial consultant of some sort. Well, here they don't have financial consultants. Here you got what you have to pay, and that's that. So there's no when can you pay this, et cetera, because there's no billing system.
Right.
There's not really an established credit system in China. It's nascent. The wealthy, the middle class, and the wealthy can get credit to buy a car, or a house, or whatever. But for the vast majority of people, there's no real credit system. There's no trust system in the society. And so they can't send you home and say, we'll bill you next month. Instead, you pay up front for everything. So when you go to the hospital, you open an account, you might put the equivalent about $750, $800 into it. And that, depending on what you've got, that should be adequate for them to open up an account for you. And then as they treat you, they're going to draw that down from your account. And when you go to check out from the hospital, or periodically, if you're there for a long time, they'll have you come in and sign, look at your expenses and sign for it. And then boom, that part of your account has just gone away. And if it's too low, you better top it up. And then
See, that was fascinating to me,
So-
especially because you say topping it off like
A pay-
prepaid cell phone.
Yeah, pay as you go.
Or I was thinking like you check into a hotel and they take a deposit off your credit card. Or you have to pay bail in order to get out of jail. Yeah, you have to prepay these things. They're not going to bill you later. They're not going to, say, no, we'll send him the bill later. And if he doesn't pay it all in once, we'll put him on payments. And if he doesn't make the payments, we'll send our collection agency after them. I laugh because for folks who don't know, if a hospital's ever sent your bill to a collection agency, it's a collection agency in name only, and it's actually run by the hospital. They rarely actually work with real collection agencies. It's just to make it look threatening enough. But apparently we don't do any of that in China. You've got to put the money out front.
that's right. And if you, let's say, heaven forbid, run out of money, they don't have financial counselors, they have bouncers.
Bouncers.
They will literally physically take your stuff to the, very, very politely, and they'll physically move your possessions to the curb and then wheel you out in a wheelchair.
Ugh.
And tough luck. You can
Yeah.
find a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner who will be much cheaper, and maybe
Like-
that'll help.
Like Steve Jobs did when he had your condition.
Exactly.
We see how that worked out for him.
Yeah, I don't know that his was traditional Chinese medicine, but
No,
it's all in the same sort of woo medicine,
Yes.
medicine kind of category.
we can only wish that he had access to modern medical care
Yeah.
and chosen to take advantage of it. You lose somebody, well, you lose anybody. It's fascinating to me, this idea, because I immediately think, well, in American hospitals, we have security. We have a lot of security people, but it's usually kind of for the crazies who come in, and they don't throw people out on the curb. They hand them off to the police. But as far as just not being able to pay your bills and throwing you out to the curb, that's inconceivable, if I can use the word.
I think that word means what you think it means.
That fascinates me because, as you say, it's not really free market medicine in China, but that aspect of it certainly makes me think, well, if you can't afford to pay, then you don't get the service. Now, I know that's a simplistic understanding, and in China, there are the kind of two-tiered insurance levels and employer contributions, and there's some things going on to manage that. But the idea of, just fee for service. How many people in America have said, well, if you're wealthy enough, definitely consider concierge medicine, pay as you go. But how many people in a system like ours that already taxes us to the extent it does can afford to do that and also have insurance and your employer paying insurance and Medicare and Medicaid and paying for everybody else's insurance? But that fascinated me, that idea that, you pay in advance and you pay for what you get.
And I think it's important to think about it, not in terms of some sort of inherent cruelty or anything. It's resource allocation. And
And
resources go toward what they need to go toward. And the other aspect that is related to that, that's also very surprising to Americans, is the kind of routine, what I call basic nursing care, is not provided in a Chinese hospital. So when you go into a Chinese hospital, you pay about $30 a night for the bed. And that's all you're paying for. You're not paying for soap in the bathroom. You're not paying for towels in the bathroom. You're not paying for food. there will be, at least in my experience, and of course, the giant sprawling country, I have been to one hospital, but for extended periods of time. They will have a cafeteria that you can order from, but you're not getting nutritionist designed meals specific for your condition, which can be really important when your condition is cancer. And there are a lot of things that you are supposed to eat and a lot of things that you aren't supposed to eat. You got to just be really careful for yourself. And there too, it's a little bit of every man for himself, kind of that form of individualism.
Yes.
But
Right.
again, it's a low resource individualism.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when you first described this to me, I thought, gosh, is that ever the Wild West? the Wild East?
It kind of is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have friends who are very critical, and for good reasons, of the American medical system, and especially the people who handle dietary needs. So I know some of these folks would be happy to take it on themselves to get it right. But the average person out there, without any idea what is going to feed their body versus what is going to feed their cancer, yes, you would want somebody with some expertise to provide that information. I want to give a quick shout out to Apollo Zeus, who is giving us some love on the chat there. Put a couple pounds in to support the ARC UK. Very much appreciated. Mary Aline is also in with a generous super sticker there. Just giving us support, no questions yet, but thank you very much for the support. We do appreciate that. And you see why I return to this theme of we think we know what we want from a free market healthcare system. I do love the fact that you have seen some support. Now, I know this could go on for a while, and so if folks go to the GoFundMe, they're going to see Amy entered a very ambitious goal, but it could be very realistic too, because again, you're paying as you go. You're paying for what you get. We have a lot of Rush fans in the audience. They'll appreciate, because they have a song called Something for Nothing, that you can't get something for nothing. So as you say, it may seem cruel, but you can't make medical care appear out of thin air. You can't get something for nothing. Somebody's got to pay for it.
Yeah, and we talked about before we started the show today that it is taking you a little extra in fees to be able to extract the money from the GoFundMe. 10%, you said. So it is something that is it's certainly there's opportunity to give. So.
Yeah, and folks, don't blame GoFundMe for that. Their relationship with banks in the States versus banks in China is complicated. Just thank you for your support for those of you who are. I think
it's a wire fee, I do believe. So it's not.
It's complicated.
It's complicated, but I'm very heartened to know that that support. The monetary support is transferring over to you in China, which is really amazing.
It was absolutely shocking to me when you proposed the idea of a GoFundMe. I'm thinking, great, I have a lot of Facebook friends. Maybe they'll put in $5 a piece, and I'll end up with $500 to go toward my medical bills. The idea that it would pay for. So far, I believe, if you do the math, it's basically paid for all the major expenses that I've had so far. And now on the flip side of all of this, or I don't know, we've flipped too many times, but anyway, the benefit, if you want to call it that, the outcome of all of this is that healthcare in China is, relative to the US, extraordinarily affordable. Mm-hmm. So that $30 a night hospital room, try to find that in a US city.
Yes. And you told us that stayovers are not unusual. A lot of things that would be outpatient here in the States, no, they'll let you stay over a night or several nights for those procedures.
Or they'll make you, perhaps they'll want you to stay over more, I do believe.
Yeah, let is not quite the right word. They won't really let you out, and actually by law they can keep you there. So if they catch you walking down the street without release papers from the hospital, you could theoretically be arrested for that.
Wow.
Actually, they're going to just take you back to the hospital, but it is truly an authoritarian system in that sense.
Right.
And so now we've been talking about the affordability of it. So I pay about $750 a month all in for my chemotherapy medicines, for the physician's treatment. And this is on a normal month when I don't have any extra treatments or don't need any additional medicines. And I pay for a few extra ones on the side, but the kind of the baseline chemotherapy treatment, it's about $750 to $800 per month, which is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And for the average Chinese person, that's way more than they make in a month, or certainly more than their disposable income in a month. But compared to what I would be paying in the US, I'm sure it's a fraction. I don't happen to know what the prices would be in the US for the equivalent drugs, but I'm sure it would be a whole lot more. And for the expertise of the physicians administering them and so on. So it actually is, in that sense, meeting the demands that I set out earlier. How do you make a system that it's possible for the vast majority or this giant country to get adequate treatment? I think they've actually come across a system. It ain't what I would want, but
Right.
it's a system that works in the Chinese context.
Yeah, and again, as you say, these numbers are cheap for you, but not necessarily for people who live there. If I could just read a couple paragraphs from the New York Times article. There was a good article earlier this year about what's been going on with Chinese healthcare and changes they're trying to make. They write, people with personal health accounts, as they do have personal health accounts, are also finding it harder now to use the money for themselves. Retirees must now spend at least $75 out of pocket each year on medicine and outpatient expenses before they can claim partial reimbursement from the employee insurance pools. Workers who are still employed must spend at least $100 of their own money. Now, I'll stop the quote for a second and say, well, $75, $100, that's not real money. Why is that an issue? But the next paragraph here, average income for urban retirees is about $6,000 a year, not including personal savings. Rural retirees live on even far less. So yes, these numbers are very attractive to Americans, but standard of living in China, as you say, there are very rich people in China. You can look at photographs of some beautiful cities and skyscrapers, and yet you're right, with over 1.5 billion people, most of them are not living like that.
Right. So the system is it's challenged, but so far they've kind of cobbled it together. And that Times article is a good one. I'd kind of forgotten about that particular article because it's been a little while, but that is a really good introduction to the system. And there are various forms of insurance. There's the social insurance, and there's which the old age pension would be part of. So there are various ways that people put together some of that money that's not coming straight out of their pockets. But
Right.
At the bottom line, and the insurance here is generally it's not the kind of thing where you just walk in and you get taken care of with a minimal copay.
Right. Right. Yeah, I understand it's done in pools, a little more like HSAs here, except in an actual pool that is the employer can manage. We have a couple of questions in the super chat here. Now, one of them, we might need a spoiler alert because this might jump forward to more the end of the conversation. But Mary Aline, thank you for that contribution. And she asks, Dr. Garmong, do you think you and your family will stay in China?
Well, for the time being, I can't travel. So people ask me, why don't you go back to the US? And well, there are days, believe me, and we can talk more about the conditions in the hospital that have made me want to run for the door, legal or not. But right now, it's not an option for me. Hopefully, before too long, it will be, knock wood. But so at the moment, health-wise, it's not an option for me. And I've just been very fortunate that I'm able to stay here and get care. Now, as for the future, I have a job right now that is really good, and my employer has supported me in fantastic ways. However, I do think closer to retirement time for sure, that it's going to be time to get my son back to the US for his education and so on. So yes, I will be returning to the US if I have anything to say about it.
Yeah. Good.
Eventually, whether eventually is 1 year from now or 5 years from now, I can't promise that part, but eventually, yes.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's been heartening about seeing the fundraiser do well is, hopefully you won't find yourself either out on the street in front of a hospital or so buried in debt that coming back to the States is affected by that. You've got so many other factors involved in that. It would be good if the money wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
Well, and for people who are contributing to the fund, and maybe this is a spoiler you were thinking about, my sort of dream is that the last expense item paid out of that fund will be my flight ticket home to the United States.
Yes.
It will be a one-way ticket. So if that helps people think about their decision.
Yes.
Well,
that's certainly.
We're pretty selfish. We'd love to have you back in the States.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. Oh, we'd have such a big party for you, Robert. Really, really would. Oh my goodness.
Now we got another super chat, a generous one from Jeff Bannister, and he's asking the same question that I was asking when we talked about this last, that made me think, oh yeah, we've got to have a conversation on the Thursday show about this. He says, I'm confused. Are we saying that Chinese healthcare is not socialized medicine like Canada? Now, I need to explain, Jeff is from Canada, so he is dealing with that healthcare system there. He's asking, yeah, you don't have socialized medicine there? You don't have a Canadian type system?
It is definitely not a Canadian system. And I'm not up on the details of the Canadian versus the UK system, but absolutely not. The Chinese system is much more capitalist than the Canadian system is.
Mhm.
Yep. Well, my understanding is it's a typical socialized system. They're not as bad off as the UK and the NHS, but there are procedures you'll wait forever for, procedures you may not get approved for, and medical tourism is not an unusual thing. If you need it bad enough, you come to the States to get it.
Yeah. If you need an MRI, then you can get it a lot easier in the States, and we're pretty close.
And there are a lot of people in China who've never had a serious illness who think it's great. They just love it. And you see this on the forums and online.
You mean in Canada?
In Canada, because they've never had a serious illness, and they love that their doctor's visits are free because they've never actually had a substantial need.
And I would say, in just on that, you mentioned MRI. My doctor called me one day at 9 o'clock in the morning and said, there's something I'd like to see a little more closely. Could you come in for an MRI? And we were there in half an hour, and it was done by noon.
Wow.
With a fancy brand new Siemens MRI machine. So
Now, I think you told us, though, maybe one of those free market aspects, sometimes they'll call you to go, but you might wait all day to actually get in. They might be busy that day.
Well, yeah, and there too, it's especially for the actual hospital bed itself.
Yes.
They don't necessarily plan particularly well on when exactly that bed is going to be available. So I've had them tell me to come in at 10:30 in the morning, and my bed comes available at 9:30 at night.
Mhm.
And I've been sitting in a hard plastic chair with a bony, cancerous body. I feel like a stegosaurus with all the plates down the back.
Although I've got to say, there have been a lot of times I've been in American emergency rooms or, their intake, their triage area, and it can be a lot like that too. Are you either going to admit me or let me go, but you wait for hours? So
Right. And well, and coupled with the fact that once you're actually in there, you're not supposed to leave, and there's an authoritarian aspect of it. But if you don't have the money to pay, then you are told to go away. So how very interesting. Oh my gosh.
yeah, in the States, they don't make you go away if you can't pay. That's the one thing we've got is they will waste your time all day in the emergency room until they finally figure out, oh, we don't see anything wrong with you. You can go.
Right. Or they'll just allow people who don't even necessarily have a condition, if there are homeless people who are asking for care, then they are admitted.
Well, yeah, you can't turn them away.
No,
I don't mean to get into complaints about the
Yeah,
American
yeah.
system. And
it's very strange.
I really wish you were here receiving the care that you're getting.
Yes.
It was just fascinating to me. And Jeff Bannister's question, again, is the real reason why I wanted to have this discussion. It's fascinating that at least some aspects of it, I wish we would adopt. And yet I don't want, obviously, that healthcare system here. I still think the American healthcare system is the greatest in the world. It's just sometimes that's not saying much.
Here's how I think about it, because it puzzles me as well, right? That it's and not the exact structure of it, but the idea that it's not what you would just expect. You go to the People's Republic of China and you would certainly just expect communist healthcare or something like it, especially because healthcare has always been one of the top priorities of the socializers.
Mhm.
So it's a little puzzling from the outset why that industry would be so different. And I think the what I admire about the Chinese system is that, as I've laid it out, I think they really did put some thought into, here are our resources, here are the demands, how do we meet the two?
Mhm.
And it maybe no elements of it would be exactly what we would want, but at least that way of thinking is better than what we've got in the West right now.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I have a theory about that, and I wonder if you think this might be might explain some of it. In the United States, we have landlines, telephone lines, and they're very poor quality. The audio is compressed into a very narrow bandwidth. In Europe, some of the phone lines are so good that music studios have actually relayed. Example of that is a church organ over the phone lines into a music studio in order to record them.
Wow.
Same thing happened with cell phone service. So we were the early adopters. We started it all. But in Europe, when they finally picked up on it, they were several standards ahead because they waited. In other words, the early adopters, we get everything first. But in some ways, we also get all of the baggage and the regulations. And once other countries pick up on it, they can pick and choose the best of it. And I wonder if in China, because they were so behind for so long, maybe a few of these things, as they brought, MRI machines, for example, and different imaging and technology, but even some of the practices online, I wonder if coming into it late doesn't make it, some of it at least, seem like it's running a little more cleanly than we are, a
And
little
I
more
think
efficiently.
that may well be the case with a lot of infrastructure in China. But let's back up a little bit, because I realize there's a misleading implication of a lot of what I've been saying here, because what the Chinese have done is brilliant implementation of a pragmatic system.
Okay.
And I mean pragmatic literally in the philosophical sense.
Yeah, in the worst, most unprincipled way.
we are going to provide health care somehow through a division that we determine between the private market and government and so on. Now, of course, the ideal solution would be one based on principle. And that, I think, is, again, part of why we're all sort of puzzled about this, because their principle, if they were truly a communist country, this is part of why I say they're not a communist country, but if they were truly a communist country, their principle would be communism. And so we would have, the NHS on steroids, and there would be no choice, and there would be complete authoritarianism, and the results are predictable. Or if they were making the opposite principled choice, then we would have a true free market. So we're having this conversation within a box, and it's important to make that box explicit, because you can praise the solution to a pragmatic problem without endorsing the pragmatism that leads to the problem in the first place. So
Great
I think
point.
it's important to take that step back and look at it from a more principled perspective.
Right. Yeah, because I used a bit of a teaser in the show title. Yeah, I wouldn't want people to get the wrong impression. We don't mean there's really a free market. There are elements that are analogous to a free market that maybe are a lesson for some of us here in the West.
Yes, and tell us about, and just to reiterate for those perhaps who have joined late. Well, first of all, I just want to say we are on ARCUK today, so any and all super chats and super stickers and all of that are very much appreciated. And go to the running of ARCUK, the channel itself and the programming and all the good people who give our time to it. However, if you do have, after making a super chat or a super sticker here, if you have a couple of extra dollars to spare, you can go to tinyurl.com/Garmong. So that's Garmong. You can see that in the title, or you can Google GoFundMe and then Garmong, and you'll be able to see the page that we've set up for GoFundMe. And that all of those dollars go to Robert Garmong and his expenses that he needs for his treatment currently, and living expenses and such.
And to be clear, there may be some wire fees involved in that, but none of it goes to the Chi-Com government.
I hope not.
Right. At least not until it's spent.
But yeah, in the meantime, to reiterate, you were talking about how the Chinese, you've got a lot of resources going to medicine, for instance, but not to the facilities or the infrastructure, the buildings or the beds, and I think at one point you mentioned that they don't really have a systematized working relationship, say, with people who come in and change your sheets or help you get up into shower and things like that. And that's actually something that you need to contract out yourself. Is that right?
That's right. And that too relates directly to the Chinese culture. Remember that Chinese families typically live together in 3 generations. So grandma, mom and dad, and the kids are all living together, maybe in one apartment, literally living together, or maybe living clustered together. And so the grandparents are there. Their existence is to take care of the kids while mom and dad are out working. So when you go to the hospital, it's assumed that there's a caretaker who's been at home for you. So most people here have a full-time live-in maid, in effect, and it's their mom, maybe retiree. So that person, then when you go into the hospital, would become your caretaker. And they do a lot of the things that nurses do in American hospitals. And you say, well, okay, but, there's also an awful lot of migration in China. So what do you do if you don't have the children's grandparents there? Well, the next step is labor is very cheap in China. So for about, depending on where you live, of course, anywhere from $500 to $700 a month, you can have a full-time live-in nanny. And so that person would become your caretaker. And for those like me who don't have that kind of money to have a live-in nanny, even at $500 a month, or whatever, if you don't have that, then you contract out someone who will come in, and they work for a company that's bonded and all the rest of it, or whatever the equivalent is in China. And so they come in and they will provide, as you say, I believe the sheets, I think the hospital changes them once a week, whether they need it or not. But your person can do it more often than that. They can give you a sponge bath, they can go get your food for you, and so on.
Bed linens once a week at home wouldn't be so bad. In a hospital, I think I might want a little more than that.
but those people are and some of them are very good and some of them are not so good. I've had a lot of both kinds over the last year, but again, it has to do with facilities versus medicine. And then it also fits in, I don't care how you want to allocate resources in the US, it wouldn't work, right? Number one, most people don't have that family structure. Number two, if you wanted to hire somebody to come in and do it, you'd have to pay all the FICA taxes and so on. It would not cost you $50 a day or whatever it costs.
Right.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to say it's as simple as US good, China bad, or obviously I don't want to say vice versa either. The way I think of it is China is a communist country, but it's really more of a cronyist country.
Yeah.
It's more pragmatic than that. And it's akin to the United States. We think of the United States as a free market country. Capitalist would be going too far, but the way to explain all of the corruption you see in the United States is we're not capitalists, we're cronies. Now, we're crony capitalists, they're crony communists. But the point is, that you don't have a communist healthcare system because they're not really communists. Yaron Brook has made that point. They're not really a communist country, not in the sense that anybody understands it.
Yeah.
Even though it justifies everything the government does, it's not really what the government does.
It is an authoritarian country,
Yes.
akin to a communist country, but it's an authoritarian country in which you have nominal private property. And there is actually a name for that kind of country, and it's called fascism.
Yes.
Yes.
So even though the Chinese Communist Party would not be happy to hear me call them this, it's actually a fascist country at this point.
Yeah. It's fascinating, the idea you'd rather be called communist than fascist.
Yeah.
Well, they may not believe in it anymore, but it's still their justification. It's still what keeps them in power. Well, Dr. Garmong, this has been a great conversation, and I'm glad that we've had the opportunity to share not just your story, but also this information. It's so easy to think simplistically about these things, but to get a better idea of what it looks like in the second, I guess now, most populous country in the world. Did India just take that over?
They did.
It's fascinating to me, and I feel much better informed, got a little better handle on what's going on over there, including, again, that mixture, that cronyism, what it is that keeps it all running. We think, well, they had to have dissolved like the Soviet Russians did, but it's not that simple because it's not that communist.
And the one thing that the Chinese have been throughout their entire history is they are the world's greatest pragmatists, in the sense that you can have a failure of defining principles that would solve your problems that leads to a gigantic, seemingly insurmountable problem. And yet somehow they kick this part of the can down the road, and then they put these two together, and somehow they weave together something like a solution that gets them through to the next crisis. And they've been doing this for thousands of years. So the healthcare system here is very much the same way. And for me, as you say, the China good, America bad, China bad, America good. We're both pragmatist countries. China, I think, in some ways, is a better run pragmatist country in certain respects where they want to be. And now let me finish this out. Maybe time-wise, I don't know where we are, but
We can go as long as we need to.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on the medical side, one thing that really shocks many Americans is that China has actually excellent medical care in the sense of people who are highly trained and extremely diligent and disciplined. My doctor reminds me very much of the doctors from when I was a kid. And my mom was a medical manager, and I grew up in awe of these guys that you could call at 11 o'clock at night, and they're groggy in bed, but they're going to give you an answer to your question. And in our case, it's going to be a WeChat message, but we get answers to every question my wife asks. And it may not be the kind of American style answer where they're going to give you the full causal explanation of things. But if there's a problem, our doctors are on it 24/7. And in terms of the dedication of the healthcare professionals, it is absolutely a throwback to the old days of the US healthcare system, which I'm told you just don't see anymore, the way that our system has developed. You know, I've been away for 15 years, so I can't really speak to the American system anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite the system, but if you do have a concierge doctor, for instance, then yes, maybe you'll have a little better luck in terms of contacting them. Yeah, but other than that.
And they're going to be extremely well trained if you're in a major city, and if you're a little careful, you do have to doctor shop. When I was first diagnosed, we spent probably the better part of a month meeting with different doctors, talking to them about the treatment plans and so on. And we settled on a guy who has been just great. And I've been no end of pleased. Now, am I going to get super creative solutions? Probably not. They're going to be off the shelf solutions. And he's not an uncreative guy, and they have multiple solutions that they have to choose among, but he's not Dr. House.
Right.
You're not going to get, on average, I'm sure they exist here, but you're very unlikely to get a really creative thinker. You're going to get somebody who's deductively applying exhaustive knowledge of the field. Where Americans often have this impression that Chinese doctors, get 6 months of training and barefoot in some village, and then here they are. The treatment is nothing like that, with rusty hypodermic needles and so on. It is truly professional medicine. It's not going to be creative medicine.
Right.
And in terms of research, here's a dirty little secret that most Americans are shocked by when I talk to them. In many areas of cancer research, or in many areas of research, including a lot of cancer research, China is ahead of the US.
Wow.
Now, that they've thrown tons of government resources at doing research. And most research is not creative Einstein type stuff or even Edison type stuff. But most of it is the Edison stuff in the sense of trying 99 different wires to see which one works in your electric light bulb. And they do a tremendous amount of cancer research and biotech research. And in many areas, American physicians tip their hat to what the Chinese are developing. So some of the hot new treatments, hot new drugs are coming out of China. And in the US, I think you have cultural reasons, or we're getting into culture wars where science and biotech are kind of taking a bad name, so particularly on the right. And again, stepping back, this is all within a box of government funding, throwing huge amounts of resources at universities where people are being paid to come up with the next new cancer treatment, which is far from the actual capitalist solution that we might prefer. But given the system that we both have, China's doing it better in some ways.
Well, speaking of creativity and kind of innovative thinking that we find in America, specifically and kind of the Montessori type of approach methodology. Could you tell us a little bit about your profession there in China and what you do? And I know that you've worked with Montessori schools there and helped open them up and got them off the ground and running. And secondarily, I'd like to know what your take is on, say, the Montessori method became more popular in China, what that would actually mean for the Chinese people.
It's good to end on this because I shouldn't let my actual career go unmentioned in this entire conversation. Yes. Yeah, I came to China 14 years ago as a university professor to teach philosophy, Western culture, business ethics, which is an interesting challenge in China. And that's a whole conversation in and of itself. The actual amount of freedom, academic freedom that I had as a university professor here versus in the United States. But let's not go down that rabbit hole. When my son was born and got to the point where he was ready to start his own education, I wanted to be part of that. And I knew that Montessori education was the way to go. And Montessori was growing in China. It is growing in China, has been for 10 years or so.
Wow. And
so I actually quit my job at the university and became a Montessori teacher, got the Montessori AMS teaching certificate. And so now I am working in the Montessori market. And since then, that's been about 5 years ago now, I guess. Since then, I've become the principal of a brand new, very large Montessori school, high-end Montessori school in, initially I was working at a school in Guangzhou, China, which is in the southern part of the country. The famous trading port used to be known as Canton. Now it's Guangzhou. And now we're currently moving to a larger and even fancier school in Shenzhen, which is the sister city, sort of the San Diego to Guangzhou's Los Angeles. It's all one conurbation. And so I'm seeing really the very high end. Before I was working at a sort of medium high level Montessori school. And most parents that we dealt with and that we deal with really see Montessori as an important solution to the failings of the Chinese education system. And
Wow.
you introduced this through creativity. Parents don't want their kids to be put in a box at age 2 and converted into whatever their kindergarten wants them to be. They know that their children should develop independently, and they want their children to have creative thinking. And I'm talking about the younger parents, more cosmopolitan, especially in the major cities like Guangzhou and Shenzhen. The parents really are looking for that creativity and the support, the respect for the child that comes with the Montessori method. They don't necessarily know the details of it, and they often contradict it. I watch them yelling at their child literally on the stairs out of the school, but many of our parents, and that's not all of them either. We have some parents who are better Montessorians than I am. And depending on where you are in China and what resources are available there, many of the parents are more purist than their school. So if the school, for example, we had a teacher, a foreign teacher, an English teacher, who was giving out treats as rewards for kids in his class. And we had parental complaints. I mean, now he was an excellent teacher in every other respect. And I could not get him to stop giving candy to the kids. But we had regular complaints. And I would bring the parent in and have them talk to him. And eventually it didn't work. But they can be more purist than the school is.
Wow.
So it's really, and that's increasing with time.
Wow.
A lot of people still don't know what Montessori really means. And it's a lot easier to find a school that has a sign saying Montessori than to find a school that really is Montessori.
Yes.
Anyone can go on Taobao, which is the Chinese one of the Chinese online sales platforms, and buy all the equipment. You may not really know how to use it and how to talk to children, but parents really are hungry for something better. Now, the problem is that works in kindergarten, which in China, go ahead.
I've got to say, you know, although we were talking about the healthcare system, I'm glad that Amy brought this up because, you know, the people who are supporting, trying to help out in your journey that you're going through, if they didn't need already more reasons to want to support you, the fact that you are, you know, helping to grow Montessori in China in your way with your students, that's powerful stuff right there. I've got to give a shout out. You know, we've talked about the fundraiser a few times. Excuse me. When we had you on the Sunday show, we actually called everybody out and we read the names of all the contributors, and it was really exciting because there were pages and pages and pages of them. Well, just while we've been doing this show, and I'll mention their names since they did them publicly, not anonymously. I want to shout out Mary Aline, because she has not only been in with the super chat here on the ARCUK Supporting the Channel, she has also contributed additionally to your fundraiser. Mary Aline, thank you for that. And a name you will know, very generous contribution from Dr. Boydston, Stephen Boydston. Thank you very much for that as well. And again, this wasn't a fundraising episode, but everybody wants to play a part, to give their little bit of help. And in some cases, a very big amount of help. So, Dr. Garmong, thank you for this conversation. Again, just like with Jeff Bannister's question, it fascinated me that, yeah, I don't want to be in China for healthcare, but there are some ways in which they're, as I suggested, they have less baggage in some of the ways in which they're executing that. And it's good to know. It's good to know that you have chosen to be in China, that you've dedicated a substantial part of your life to doing this work in Montessori in that country. and that you were able to find some of the care that you needed during a challenging time. I can't thank you enough for having this conversation with us, for answering the questions that have come in, and for sharing your experience.
Yes.
And thank you so much for the opportunity. This is an important topic, a lot of important topics. Healthcare, of course, is extremely important, and Montessori is really the key to improving Chinese culture, in my opinion. I didn't come here to solve China or to save China, which many people have come and tried to do, and to their own detriment. But to introduce
I think we can see you're there to do the work that you love, and of course, you've found your partner as well, your spouse in China. So yes, I don't doubt that you're doing it entirely because this is where your passions lie. But it's great having an advocate like you over there, and we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a good life, and I've been pretty blessed, to use a religious term. I've been fortunate to have run into the right people and had a pretty good career over here, and we'll see where it goes. This cancer is about to, I hope it's about to drop me off on the shore, and we're going to see where it leads from here.
You know, we don't all want to be in hard times in order to find out who really respects and cares about us. We don't want to pay that price for that. But since you had to pay that price, I'm glad you've gotten to see how many people respect the work you do, appreciate just your personality and your character. And folks, everybody listening, thank you. Huge shout out to everybody who has given to the ARCUK, who has given to the fundraiser, and really just everybody who found this conversation interesting. Please consider sharing it out on your social media so that folks will get the same information and really the same inspiration that we have. Dr. Garmong, thanks again, Amy.
Yes,
thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert Garmong. Thank you, Robert Nasir. Thank you, everybody in the audience. I love you all.
All right. Thank you very much. This has been Life on Earth. We will see you next week, everybody. Have an outstanding evening.